I learned the rules of his world the way you learn a language in a country where you do not belong. By mistake. By listening. By saying the wrong word at the wrong table. I did not know who he was the night I grabbed his collar and begged him to kiss me. I only knew my ex was 3 meters behind me, smiling that smile, and that the man in front of me had eyes the color of wet slate and a stillness I mistook for safety. He kissed me like a man signing a document. Slow, deliberate, as if he understood, before I did, that some things, once written, cannot be unwritten. By morning I would learn his name. By the end of the week I would learn what his name cost. By the end of the month I would learn that the most dangerous man in Milan had decided, without asking me, that I was the one thing in the world he would not let go of. I should have started running. I started baking instead. The kitchen at Trattoria Beneventi ran on 3 rules. Don't burn the butter, don't argue with Chef Rinaldi, and don't look up when the back door opened after 11. I had broken the first 2 before, never the third. I was piping creme tessire onto a row of fig tarts, 12 of them, in a line, the copper pot warm at my elbow. I had tapped my wooden spoon 3 times against its rim, the way my mother had taught me before she died, and set it down. The pastry bag in my hand was the only thing in the world that mattered. Cream is forgiving until it is not. Stop in the middle of a rosette and the whole thing slumps. You cannot unslump a rosette. You can only start over, and there were no figs left. So when the back door opened, and the air changed, the way air changes before a storm, pressure dropping in the bones of your ears, I did not look up. Behind me, somebody dropped a ladle. Marco, the sous chef, made a sound like he had swallowed his own tongue. Chef Rinaldi, who had screamed at a senator the week before, said, very softly, Signor Vitali. I finished the rosette, then the second, then the third. My hands did not shake because if my hands shook the cream would break, and I had been piping cream since I was 11 years old, and my hands had never broken anything that mattered. I looked up on the 4th tart. He was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the back hall. Tall, dark coat, no tie, the collar of his shirt open 1 button too far for a man who looked otherwise carved out of restraint. His face was a quiet face. Not handsome the way men in magazines are handsome. Handsome the way a closed knife is handsome. The kind of beauty that suggests what it is for. He was looking at me. Not at Chef Rinaldi, who had taken his hat off. Not at Marco, who had picked up the ladle and was holding it like a rosary. At me. At the pastry bag in my hand. You did not stop, he said. His voice was low and unhurried, the way a man speaks who has never had to repeat himself. The cream would break, I said. A small silence. Then, and I would think about this for weeks afterward, the way you think about a stare that wasn't there in the dark, the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, the shape that exists before a smile, when a man is deciding whether he has the right to one. Pasticera, he said. The word was flat, observational, the way you might say the door, or the knife. He walked past me. He smelled like cold rain and something underneath it, bergamot, I think, and something darker than bergamot, the way the inside of a violin smells when you put your nose against the wood. He went through the kitchen, through the swinging door into the dining room, and the kitchen exhaled all at once like a lung. Marco crossed himself. You finished the rosette, Chef Rinaldi said, in a voice I had never heard from him. Madonna Santa Mira. You finished the rosette. It would have broken, I said again, but my hands were shaking now. Late. Too late. The body is always braver than it knows, and then it pays for it afterward. Do you know, Chef Rinaldi said, who that was? A customer, I said. He laughed. It was not a laughing laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just watched his daughter walk across a railway bridge. Yes, he said. A customer. I did not ask. There is a kind of question a kitchen does not answer, and I had worked in kitchens long enough to know the shape of one. I turned back to my tarts. I piped the 5th rosette, and the 6th, and by the 12th my hands had stopped shaking, and I told myself I had imagined the way he had said pasticera, as if he were naming a thing he intended to remember. I was still telling myself this when the door swung open again 40 minutes later, and Marco stuck his head in. "Mira," he said. "He wants to compliment the pastry chef. Tell him thank you." "Mira." "Marco." "He is not asking." I wiped my hands on my apron. I took the apron off. I walked through the swinging door into the dining room with flour still on my forearm and 3 tarts on a small white plate. Because if you are going to a table, you bring something. That is the rule my mother gave me, and rules from dead women are the rules you do not break. He was alone at the corner table. The restaurant had emptied around him without seeming to. He looked up when I came, and his eyes, I had been wrong about them in the kitchen. They were not slate. They were the color of the river in winter, when something has gone under the ice and you can see the shape of it, but not the name. "Sit," he said. I sat. It was the last ordinary minute of my life. I did not sit at tables with customers. It was a rule, mine, not the restaurant's. I had built my life around a small column of rules, because my life had been built and unbuilt twice already, and I had learned that columns were the only thing that held a roof up. I sat anyway. He did not speak for a long time. He looked at the tarts. He looked at my hands. He did not look at my face, which was the first courtesy any man had paid me in a year. "Your mother taught you," he said. "My mother?" 3 taps. He nodded once at the kitchen door, where the copper pot was. On the rim. "I heard them when I came in. You heard the spoon. I hear everything." He said it the way another man might say I take milk in my coffee, without weight. Which is how I knew the weight was real. "She did," I said. "My mother. She taught me. She is dead." It was not a question. I should have flinched. I did not. 2 years, I said. "And 4 months. He nodded, slowly, as if I had given him a piece of information he had been waiting for. Then he picked up one of the tarts. He did not eat it. He held it in the flat of his palm and looked at the rosette on its top, the curl, the little raised heart in the center, and something passed over his face that was not for me. Something old. He set the tart down again uneaten. "It is good work," he said. "You haven't tasted it. I do not need to." He took out a billfold. He laid down a €100 note. He laid down another, then a third. I opened my mouth to say the tarts are €8 and closed it because the notes were not for the tarts. "I will be back on Thursday," he said. "I would like the same table." "I don't. I know you don't." He stood. He buttoned his coat. And then, because I did not move, because I could not seem to remember which muscles were the standing ones, he leaned down, not close, not improper, but close enough that I could smell the rain, and the bergamot, and the violin, and said, very quietly, "Pasticara. Look at me when I leave." I looked. He left. I went back into the kitchen with €300 in my apron pocket, and a roar in my ears and Chef Rinaldi crossing himself a second time when he saw the money. "Mira," he said. "Mira, you will not. I won't. Lorenzo Vitali does not. I won't, Chef. But I would. I knew I would. I did not know yet that he knew I would too." I walked home along the canal at 1 a.m. Milan in November is the color of pewter. I was thinking about his hands. His hands had been very still on the table, the kind of still that is not rest, and I was thinking about the way his hands were still when I heard a voice from a doorway behind me. "Mira." I closed my eyes. I had been dreading that voice for 14 months. I had practiced, in the shower, in the dark, the things I would say. None of the practiced things came. "Marcello," I said. He stepped into the streetlight. He looked thinner. He looked exactly the same. He smiled the smile that had taught me what a smile could lie about. "You're walking alone," he said. "At night. Still. Go away. I just want to talk." "You broke my wrist," I said. "The last time you wanted to talk." His face did the thing his face did. The hurt little boy thing. It used to work on me. It had used to work on everyone. That was a misunderstanding. I started walking. He matched me. He had always been good at matching. It is the small skill of men like him. They walk at your pace. They breathe at your rhythm. They make the air around you feel like a leash you didn't know you were wearing. Marcelo, I will scream, you won't. He was right. I wouldn't. Milan does not scream at 1 a.m., not on a canal street, not for a girl with flour on her sleeve. There was a black car at the corner. I had not noticed it. I noticed it now because the back door was opening, and a man was getting out, a heavy man, mid-30s, eating something out of a paper cup, who looked up at me and said, with his mouth full, "Signorina Belandi? Signor Vitali would like to know if you require a ride." Marcelo stopped. I stopped. The heavy man took another bite of whatever it was. It looked, in the streetlight, like cabbage. "Cabbage soup," he said apologetically when he caught me staring. 10 kilos in 3 weeks. The doctor said no. But the doctor is a coward. I am Beppe. The car is warm. I looked at Marcelo. Marcello was looking at the car the way a dog looks at a fence it has just realized is electric. "Yes," I said. "I require a ride." I got in the car. Beppe shut the door. As we pulled away, I saw, in the wing mirror, Lorenzo Vitali standing across the street under an awning I had not seen him under, his hands in his coat pockets, watching Marcello not move. He had been there the whole time. I did not know what frightened me more, that he had been there, or that I was glad. Beppe drove the way a man drives who has driven the same streets for 20 years and has never once been pulled over. Slow. Bored. One hand on the wheel, the other holding the cup of cabbage soup, which smelled, in the closed car, like a wet sweater. "You are not afraid," he observed. "I am very afraid," I said. "You do not look afraid. I am a pastry chef. We do not look afraid. The cream notices." He laughed. It was a real laugh, big and unguarded, the laugh of a man who had not yet learned that his employer was a man you did not laugh around. Or, I thought, watching him, a man who had learned and decided not to. Lorenzo Vitali, it seemed, kept a cousin in the front seat the way other men kept a window open. For air. "Where do you live, Signorina?" "Via Spalato, the yellow building." "I know it." He did. He pulled up to my door without my having to say. I sat there a moment with my hand on the latch. "Beppe," I said. Who is he?" Beppe took a slow sip of soup. He did not look at me. "He is a man," he said, "who does not like it when girls walk home alone on the canal at 1 a.m. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I am paid to give. I got out. I went up to my apartment. I did not sleep. I stood at the window and watched the black car sit at the curb until 5 in the morning, when it pulled away, and a different black car took its place. I did not see him on Tuesday. I did not see him on Wednesday. On Thursday at 9 p.m. He came in through the front, in a different coat, with a man behind him I did not recognize and did not like the shape of. He sat at the corner table. I made him a torta. I did not want to. My hands wanted to. I had been making it since Tuesday in my head, a simple thing. Almonds and pears, nothing showy, the kind of dessert you make when you do not yet know what a person will forgive. I sent it out. I did not go to the table. He did not ask me to. But on his way out he stopped at the kitchen door and said, in that flat, low voice, "Almonds. Good." And then, "Your wrist healed crooked." I had not known he had seen. "It healed enough," I said. He left. The next day a small parcel arrived at the restaurant. Inside was a wooden spoon, olive wood, heavy, the grain in it like water moving under ice. There was no note. I knew, the way you know the weather, that he had chosen it himself. I started tapping it 3 times against the copper rim that night. It made a different sound than the old one. Lower. Truer. I did not throw the old one away. I set it in the drawer beside the new one, and that was the first lie I told myself about Lorenzo Vitali, that I was keeping both, because I could not decide. On Friday, Chef Rinaldi pulled me into the dry storage room. Mira, Chef, the Vitali family. Yes, they are not. He searched the shelf of canned tomatoes for the word, did not find it. They are not a family the way your family was a family. I gathered. Lorenzo Vitali is the capo. Of Milan. Of the north. Of. He made a gesture that took in the dry storage room, the restaurant, the city, the river, the Alps. Of. I gathered that too. Mira. His brother was killed last year. His father the year before. His sister. His sister? Chef Rinaldi closed his mouth. Opened it. Closed it again. His sister, he said finally, was 19. She was baking when it happened. Una torta della nonna. He found the oven still warm. I felt the floor tilt 1 degree off true. I did not say anything. I went back to the kitchen. I took the new spoon out of the drawer and I tapped it 3 times against the copper rim, and I made a torta della nonna from scratch, with pine nuts on top, because that is how my mother made it, and I sent it to the corner table on Sunday night when he came in alone, and I watched, through the round window in the swinging door, his face as it arrived. He did not eat it. He sat with his hands flat on either side of the plate, and he looked at it for a long time, and then he stood up and walked out without paying. I thought, I have offended him forever. I was wrong. At midnight there was a knock on the back door of the kitchen. Beppe was there. Behind him in the street, double parked, was the car. He says, Beppe told me, looking past my shoulder, not meeting my eye, thank you. He says he could not. He says, Beppe took a breath. He says please do not make him another pastichera. He says he will not survive it. He held out an envelope. I did not take it. Tell him, I said I won't. Beppe nodded. He turned to go. At the alley mouth he stopped. Mira. Yes. There is a man named Renzetti. Il Corvo. If you see a thin man with a scar through his eyebrow, you do not walk home. You call this number. He pressed a card into my hand. Day or night. He left. I closed the door. I leaned against it. Outside, in the alley, I could hear the soft idle of a car that did not drive away for a long time. It was raining, the night Marcello came back. I should have called the number. I had it pinned to the inside of the spice cupboard, between the cardamom and the cloves, where Chef Rinaldi would not see it. I had looked at it 16 times in 9 days. I had not called it. There is a kind of pride that lives in unmarried women in their late 20s, that is not pride exactly, but a refusal to be rescued twice in the same year. And I had decided, somewhere between the fig tarts and the torta della nonna I had not been allowed to make again, that I was going to walk. Home alone. On my own legs. Like a person. I made it 3 blocks. He came out of a doorway near the tram stop. He had been waiting. He had the patience, Marcello, of a man who had nothing else to be. Mira, no, just, no. I crossed the street. He crossed with me. Milan was empty in the rain. The streetlights made halos of yellow on the wet stones, and the halos shook every time a car passed, and there were no cars passing. Mira, you owe me a conversation. I owe you nothing. After everything you what, Marcello? Say it. After everything I what? He grabbed my arm. I was going to scream. I was. I had practiced it. I opened my mouth to scream, and instead, because the universe is a comedian with a cruel sense of timing, I saw, across the street, under the awning of a closed tabacaria, a tall man in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, watching me, not moving. Waiting, I understood with a cold, clean clarity, to see what I would do. So I did the thing I did. I turned to Marcello. I grabbed the lapel of his stupid wet jacket, and I said, loud enough for the man across the street to hear over the rain, "Kiss me. My ex is watching. Kiss me, please, please, just..." I did not finish. Because I had pulled the wrong lapel. I had pulled the lapel of the man who had crossed the street in the time it took me to speak. I had not seen him cross. He moved, I would learn later, the way water moves, by being where you are not yet looking. His hand closed around my wrist, gently, and lifted it off Marcello's coat. His other hand found the small of my back, and then Lorenzo Vitali, capo of the North, kissed me. He kissed me like a man signing a document. His mouth was warm and the rest of him was cold, and the rain was running down the back of my neck under my collar, and I could feel, against my hip through both our coats, the shape of something hard and metal that was not a phone. His hand on my back did not press. It rested. It said, without saying, "I am here. You may lean." I leaned. He kissed me for exactly as long as it took Marcello to understand what he was looking at, which was, I would estimate later, replaying it, sleepless, at 3 a.m, about 4 seconds. Then Lorenzo lifted his head a fraction. Not far, just enough to speak past me. "You are leaving," he said to Marcello, in the voice you use to read a weather report. "You will not return. You will not write. You will not stand in doorways. Do you understand?" Marcello made a sound like a kettle. "Do you understand?" "Yes, say it. I understand. Signor Vitali," Lorenzo said, patiently, as if teaching a child a word. "I understand, Signor Vitali. Go." Marcello went. He went the way a man goes who has just discovered he has been walking on a frozen lake. Carefully, as if any wrong step could open a hole. Lorenzo did not let go of me. His thumb moved, very slightly, on the small of my back. Once, as if confirming a measurement. "Pasticara," he said. "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you. I know." "I would not have." "I know." He stepped back. The rain rushed into the place where he had been. His hand fell away from my back, and I felt the absence of it like a sound a room makes when a clock stops. He looked down at me. His face was the same quiet face, but his eyes, the river under the ice, something was moving under there now that had not been moving in the kitchen. "Walk with me," he said. I walked with him. We did not speak. He took me as far as the door of my building and then a half step farther, into the doorway, out of the rain. Up close in the small light of the entrance bulb, I could see a thin white line along his jaw I had not noticed before. An old scar. The kind of scar a knife leaves when the knife is meant to find the artery and misses by a thumb's width. I reached up before I knew my hand was moving. I touched it. He went absolutely still. I have stood next to men who were holding their breath. I had never stood next to one who was holding his life. "Don't," he said. I dropped my hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just," he closed his eyes for a heartbeat. "Open them. Don't." He turned. He walked back into the rain. He did not look back. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed in my wet coat for a long time. My mouth tasted like rain and bergamot, and something underneath, something darker, the inside of a violin, and I did not know yet that what I had tasted was iron, and grief, and a man who had stopped himself 11 times before he kissed me at all. There was something I had not told Chef Rinaldi when he hired me. There was something I had not told Lorenzo Vitali when he sat down at my table. There was something I had not told anyone in Milan for 14 months, since I had taken my mother's last name back, instead of keeping the one she had married into, and then died with, and packed 2 suitcases, and left Naples, and the man who lived there, and the kitchen I had run for him. The kitchen had not been a restaurant. It had been a private dining room, on the 2nd floor of a palazzo on the Via Caracciolo, where 6 men had eaten dinner once a week for 2 years, and I had cooked for them, and not asked questions, and not heard things, and not seen the pages of the ledger one of them left on the chair when he stood up too fast on a Thursday in September. I had not picked up the ledger. I had not photographed it. I had not given it, 2 months later, to the carabinier who came to my door, when my wrist was still in a brace, because I could not think of a faster way to be certain Marcello would not find me. I had given it. I had moved north. I had become a girl who piped rosettes onto fig tarts at a trattoria in Milan, who tapped a wooden spoon 3 times, whose mother was dead, whose father had died first, whose hands had never broken anything that mattered. I had thought I was clean. I learned I was not on a Tuesday in late November, when a thin man with a scar through his eyebrow sat down at the corner table at 6 p.m. and ordered the vitello and asked the waiter, in a voice meant to carry, whether the pastry chef was a girl from Naples named Belandi. Marco came into the kitchen white as flour. "Mira, what? There is a man. Describe him." "He did." I closed my eyes. I did not call the number on the card. Not yet. I went out into the dining room because my legs decided before my head did, and I walked up to the corner table. His table, although he was not in it tonight, which was the whole point, and I set down a small glass of grappa I had not been asked for, and I said, "I am the pastry chef from Naples." Renzetti looked up. He had a face like a thin blade. His eyes were small and very awake. "Sit." "Signorina, I did not sit." "You have been speaking to my staff," I said. "I have been making conversation." "Make it with me, then." Something flickered in his face. I had surprised him. Good. I was so afraid I could feel my pulse behind my teeth, and there is a kind of fear that becomes its own opposite if you let it, that turns, in the throat, into a flat, dry steadiness that men mistake for courage. He saw it. He readjusted. "You worked," he said pleasantly, "for a man named Falcone. In Naples. I cooked. You cooked. You also, perhaps, saw—" "I saw nothing. And yet a ledger. I saw nothing. Pasticcia." He smiled. He used the word like he had heard it used. He had. Somewhere. From someone who should not have repeated it. "If you saw nothing, why did you run?" "Because my husband broke my wrist." It was the truth, sideways. It was also the kind of truth that closes a conversation. Because there is no man in Italy, not even Il Corvo, who has a follow-up question to a broken wrist that does not make him look like the kind of man who has follow-up questions to a broken wrist. He inclined his head. He paid for the vitello he had not finished. He stood up. "I will be back," he said with friends. He left. I went into the kitchen. I took down the card from between the cardamom and the cloves. I called. It did not ring once. "Yes," Lorenzo said. "He came." "Where are you?" "The kitchen." "He is gone, stay. Beppe is 2 blocks. Do not leave the kitchen, Lorenzo." The line was already off. He came himself. 20 minutes. I had thought he would send Beppe, or men, or both. He came alone, through the back, and he stood in the doorway in the same coat he had worn the night of the rain, and he looked at me across a kitchen full of staring line cooks, and he said, "Tell me." I told him. I told him about Naples. I told him about the palazzo and the ledger and the chair. I told him about Marcello, my husband technically, on a piece of paper neither of us had finished, and the wrist and the carabiniere and the suitcases and the train. I told him I had lied by omission to everyone in Milan for 14 months, including him, and I waited for his face to change. It did not change. When I was finished, he said, "Pasticciera." It was the 3rd time he had used the word to me. The first had been observational. The second, in the rain, had been almost gentle. This one was different. This one had a hand under it. The way you say a word when you are picking up a thing you intend to carry. "You are not going home tonight," he said. "I have to." "You are not going home tonight." I did not argue. He took my coat down from the hook himself. He held it open for me. As I turned to put my arms in it, his hand brushed the back of my neck, accidentally, or not, and I did not move away when I could have. That was the moment. That was when I knew. He took me to a house I did not know existed. It was on a side street near the Naviglio, behind a gate that did not look like a gate, in a courtyard that did not look like a courtyard. The car pulled in. The gate closed. Beppe got out and opened my door and said, with great seriousness, "Only white foods this week, Signorina. If you are hungry, I can offer rice, mozzarella, or a pear, but the pear is borderline." "Thank you, Beppe. He is in the library." The house inside was old and beautiful and very quiet. The kind of quiet that is built, not happened. I understood, walking through the front hall, that I was inside a fortress shaped like a home. Every doorway sight lined to another doorway. Every window had a second window behind it. Deeper in. There were men in the hall who did not look like men in a hall. They looked like furniture that had been told to breathe. Lorenzo was standing at the window of the library when I came in. His coat was off. His sleeves were pushed up to the elbow, the first time I had seen his forearms, and they were the forearms of a man who had carried weight. And there was a glass in his hand that he had not drunk from. "Sit," he said, without turning. I sat. He did not turn for a long time. When he did, it was as if he had finished a conversation with himself, and lost. "Renzetti is not here for the ledger," he said. "He is here because the ledger destroyed 3 families in Naples last spring, and one of those families owed his family money. He will not stop until he has you. He cannot stop. To stop is to lose face. Capisci? Yes. You cannot go home. For how long? Until he is dead." He said it the way another man might say until it stops raining. Without weight. The weight, again, made it real. "Lorenzo, I am not asking your permission to do it. I am telling you it will be done." He set the glass down. He had still not drunk from it. "I am asking your permission for one thing only." "What?" "To keep you here, in this house, where I can see you." I looked at him. The lamp behind him made a copper edge along his cheekbone and the thin scar along his jaw. I thought about the torta della nonna. I thought about the oven still warm. I thought about the way he had said don't in the doorway in the rain, not don't touch me but don't undo me, which is what don't means in the mouth of a man who has spent 11 years welded shut. "Why?" I said. He was quiet a long time. "I am going to break a rule here, the rule about whose head this story lives in, because there is a moment a story has to break its own rules to tell itself." He did not say what he thought. He thought it. I learned it later. I am setting it down here because he never said it twice. She did not stop piping the cream. The whole room had stopped, and my men had stopped, and Rinaldi, who has known me since I was 12, had stopped, and she did not stop, because the cream would break. My sister used to say that. About the cream, about the eggs, about the dough. "Lorenzo, leave. You are making the dough nervous." She was 19. The oven was still warm. I have not been able to be in a kitchen for 11 years. I walked into a kitchen tonight because the man who runs it owes me money, and a girl with flour on her arm did not look up, and finished the rosette, and I do not know what I am. I only know I will not let another kitchen go cold while I am alive to stand in it. He did not say that. What he said was, "Because you finished the rosette, I did not understand. Not all of it. Not yet. But I understood enough, the way you understand a word in a language you have been hearing for weeks before someone tells you what it means." And I nodded once, and I said, "All right." He let out a breath he had been holding, I think, since the kitchen. He came across the room. He did not sit beside me. He sat on the low table in front of me, so that we were level, and he took my left hand, the one with the wrist that had healed crooked, and he turned it over in his palm. He did not kiss it. He looked at it. He ran his thumb, once, along the bone where it had set wrong. "I will kill him too," he said quietly. "Eventually. There is no rush. Capisci? Capisco. Good." He did not let go of my hand. I did not take it back. The lamp ticked. Somewhere in the house a clock somewhere else struck the half-hour. He lifted his eyes to mine. I leaned forward, the smallest amount, before I knew I had decided to. He saw me decide. He stopped me, not with his hand, not with a word, but with the smallest shake of his head, because he had decided something else, which was that the first time would not be in a room where I was afraid. He stood up. He drew me up with him. He kissed my forehead. He held his mouth there a second too long, and then a second longer, and then he stepped back and said, in the voice of a man closing a door he intended to open later, "There is a room upstairs. It is yours. Sleep, Pasticora." Outside, somewhere south of the city, Renzetti was already calling friends. I stayed a week. The week was a strange week. I baked in a kitchen that had not been used in 11 years. Lorenzo had it cleaned the morning after I arrived. I came down at 6 and found 3 women I had never seen scrubbing copper, and a delivery van unloading flour, and Beppy sitting on the counter eating a small bowl of plain rice and looking heartbroken about it. There were new spoons in a drawer. There was a copper pot already on the stove. There was, on a shelf above the window, in a small cleaned space, a single photograph in a silver frame of a girl of 19 with flour on her nose. And Lorenzo did not say her name, and I did not ask, and I baked her torta della nonna on the 3rd morning with pine nuts and set it in front of the photograph and went out of the room so the dead girl could have it alone. When I came back, the slice was gone. The plate was clean. I did not ask who had eaten it. He came to the kitchen sometimes in the afternoons. He did not eat. He stood in the doorway. He watched my hands. Once, when I was rolling out dough, he came up behind me and put his hand on the small of my back. Just rested it there, the way he had in the rain. And he said, 3 taps. Pasticciera. I can hear them from upstairs. And he left. And I did not breathe correctly for an hour. We did not kiss. He stopped himself 4 times that week. I counted. I think he counted too. There was a rhythm to it that began to feel like a music we were composing together. A pause, a near, a step away, a not yet. I did not know I was being courted, because no one had ever courted me. Marcello had bought me. Lorenzo was waiting. On the 7th day, Renzetti made his first move. It was a Sunday. Chef Rinaldi was driving home from the restaurant at midnight. A car came up beside his. There were 2 men in the car. They did not shoot him. They shot through his windshield in a pattern around his head. 6 shots, none touching, and they drove on. He was not hurt. He was 62 years old and he had a heart. And the heart, his doctor said the next morning, had decided. He died at 4 a.m. in a hospital in Niguarda. Lorenzo came to my room himself to tell me. He sat on the edge of the bed. He did not touch me. He told me in 3 sentences. He gave me time. I cried for a long time. I cried with my whole body, the way you cry for the second mother life gives you. The one who teaches you that finishing the rosette is not the same as being brave, but is something more useful, which is being yourself in a room that has gone wrong. I cried until I was empty, and then I cried a little more, because there is always more, and Lorenzo sat beside me and did not say anything, and did not reach for me, and did not pretend it was fixable. When I was finished, I said, I should leave. He did not move. I should leave Milan. I said, I should leave you. I should go somewhere he cannot find me. I should. My voice broke. I let it. I should not be the reason a man like Rinaldi dies, Lorenzo. I should not be the reason anyone dies. I should. Go. You can, he said. I stared at him. I will, he said. Have a car ready in 20 minutes. There is a woman in Lyon who keeps a patisserie. You would have papers by Thursday. You would have a name by Friday. You would not see me again, Lorenzo. I am telling you the door is open, Pasticciera. I am telling you I will hold it open. I am telling you that if you walk through it, I will not follow. He meant it. That was the thing that broke me open. He was a man who did not lie about what he meant. And he meant it. He would put me in a car, and he would let me go, and he would stand in a hallway in Milan with his hands in his coat pockets the way he had stood across the street in the rain, and he would watch me leave and not move. He would let me have the rest of my life. He was offering it. He was offering it because he loved me, although he had not used the word, would not. Not for months. And because a man who has lost a sister in a kitchen does not lock another woman in one. I sat with the door open inside me. For a long time. I thought about Lyon. I thought about a patisserie I had never seen. I thought about a name I would not recognize when called. I thought about the rest of my life, the long quiet shape of it, with no man in any doorway, no hand on the small of my back, no spoon tap audible from upstairs. I thought about Chef Rinaldi. I thought about my mother. I thought about a girl of 19 with flour on her nose. No, I said. He closed his eyes. Mira, I am staying. Eyes open. I see what it costs. I see what it has cost. I took his hand. I put it on the small of my back myself. I am staying. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Then I will deserve it." He did not say what it was. He didn't have to. Outside, a black car that had been idling pulled away. They took me on a Wednesday. It was not a clever taking. It was a simple one, which is what made it work. Renzetti had been watching the back door of the trattoria for 11 days, even after I had stopped going there, because he understood. He understood everything, Il Corvo. It was the worst thing about him, that grief would eventually push me back. And on Wednesday at 9 in the morning, I went to the trattoria to help Marco close it, to pack Chef Rinaldi's things, to take down the photograph above the pass, him at 20, in a kitchen in Bologna, laughing at someone off camera, and wrap it in newspaper and carry it home. I went in through the front. Marco was there. The kitchen was clean. We packed quietly. We did not say much. At 10:30, I said I would go down to the cellar to look for a particular bottle of grappa that Chef had been saving for someone's wedding, and I went down the stone steps with a flashlight, and I was halfway across the cellar floor when the door at the top closed and locked, and I heard a voice I knew. "Hello, Pastichera." Renzetti was sitting on a wine crate. He had been there the whole time. Marco, I learned later, and I did not blame him, although Lorenzo did, briefly, before deciding not to. Marco had a sister in Naples, and Renzetti had been very specific about her. "I would like," Renzetti said, "to have a conversation." "All right. You are not afraid." "I am extremely afraid. You hide it well. I have been told." He smiled the thin smile. He had a knife in his hand. He was not pointing it at me. He was paring an apple with it, a small green apple, in long unbroken strips. He was performing patience. I understood, watching him, that Il Corvo had been performing patience for so many years that he no longer remembered what real patience felt like, and that this would be, eventually, the thing that killed him. "The ledger," he said. "I gave it to the carabinieri." "I know. I want to know what was in it that you remembered." "Nothing." "Pastichera." "Nothing. I cooked." I did not read. He set the apple down. He stood up. He came across the cellar floor, not quickly, not slowly, and he stopped in front of me. The blade of the small knife was very clean. "Lorenzo Vitali," he said, "will come for you. He will come tonight. He will bring perhaps 8 men. I will be ready for him with 12. He will die in this cellar. You will watch. Then I will ask you again about the ledger, and you will tell me, because by then you will understand that there is a difference between fear and the absence of hope. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes." "Tell me." "Fear ends," I said. "Hopelessness does not." He looked at me a long moment. "You are intelligent, Pastichera. I am sorry about that. It would be easier if you were not." He sat back down on the wine crate. He picked the apple back up. He continued to peel it. I sat on the floor with my back against the cold stone wall. I did not cry. I had cried. That week, all the crying I had in me. I thought instead. I thought about the layout of the kitchen above us. I thought about the cellar door, which opened inward, and the latch, which was on the other side. I thought about the small high window in the back wall, which was barred, but had, I remembered from inventory days, a loose bar on the right that Chef had been meaning to fix for 2 years. I thought about 3 taps on a copper pot. I thought about my mother. I thought, very specifically, about the fact that Renzetti had said 8 men, and that Lorenzo Vitali would not come with 8 men. He would come with 2, Beppe, and 1 other, because Lorenzo Vitali did not announce himself with armies. He arrived as weather. I thought about how to make sure Renzetti did not know that. "You are wrong about one thing," I said. He looked up. I had surprised him again. Twice. A man does not get to be Il Corvo by being surprised twice. He will not come with 8. No? He will come with 20. He will come with everyone. He has been waiting for you to do something exactly this stupid for 4 months. I watched his face. It did not change. But the apple stopped moving for half a second. Half a second is a long time, in a cellar, when a man has a knife. You are lying, Pastikara. Maybe. You are lying to make me afraid. Maybe. It is working. He stood up. He went to the foot of the stairs. He spoke in a low voice to the man at the top. There was a man at the top. Of course there was. And the man went away. Renzetti came back. He sat back down. He did not pick the apple back up. He had moved his men. I had moved one piece on his board. It was not much. It was something. I tapped my fingers 3 times against the stone floor beside my hip. I tapped them again. I did not break. He came at 1 in the morning. He did not come with 20. He did not come with 8. He came with 3, Beppe, and a man called Salvo, who I would later learn had been his father's driver, and one other I never learned the name of, because he died on the cellar stairs and it did not seem polite, to ask. He came in through the kitchen above us the way water comes in through a wall, finding the seams, the unguarded places, the spots where a man named Renzetti had assumed too much. I knew he was in the building before Renzetti did. I knew because Beppe, fool, blessed fool, the most useful fool in Lombardy, had 3 weeks earlier put a small plastic device behind the radiator of the trattoria's kitchen, just in case. And now, Renzetti's man at the top of the stairs had stopped breathing. And the floorboards above us had stopped speaking, and the only sound in the cellar was Renzetti's apple, and my heartbeat, and a cellar light buzzing slightly in its socket. Move from the door, I said. Renzetti looked at me. What? The door. Step away from it. Pastikara. Step away from the door. Signor Renzetti, or you will die against it. He did not step away. The door came in. It came in not with a kick. Lorenzo did not kick doors. He was not theatrical. He had never been theatrical, but with 2 soft sounds, a click and a sigh, because Beppe had the key. Of course, Beppe had the key. Chef Rinaldi had given him a copy 4 months ago when they had become friends over. A discussion of cabbage soup. The door came open. Lorenzo was through it before Renzetti had turned his head. I will not describe what happened next. I do not have the vocabulary. I am a pastry chef. I will say only that Lorenzo Vitali moved, in that cellar, like a thing that had been wounded for 11 years and was finally being allowed to release, and that I understood, watching him, that I had not yet seen him, that the man in the doorway in the rain, the man at the kitchen window, the man with his hand on my back, those had been a quiet over a deeper noise. The noise was here. The noise had a name. The noise was for me. Renzetti was alive when it ended. Barely. On his knees. The small knife on the floor. Lorenzo did not look at him. He looked at me. He came across the cellar without hurrying now that his hands were shaking, now that the thing inside him had nowhere to go, and he knelt in front of me and he took my face in both hands and he said, Pastikara. Pastikara. Look at me, I am looking. Are you hurt? No. Are you? No. Lorenzo, he pressed his forehead against mine. He did not kiss me. He pressed his forehead against mine and he stayed there, and his hands on my face were the only steady things in the room. You moved his men, he said, eventually into the small space between our mouths. You moved his men. Beppe heard. Pasticera. You moved his men. I tapped on the floor. I heard that too. He laughed then. Once. A small ragged laugh. He had not laughed before in my hearing. It was a terrible and beautiful sound. He leaned back. He kissed me. Finally, after the rain, after the kitchen, after the library, after the door I had not walked through, slowly, and only once, and only on the mouth, and only for a long moment, and then he stood and turned to Beppe and said, in his ordinary voice, Get her upstairs. Get her warm. Now. Beppe wrapped me in his coat. He smelled like cabbage soup and gun oil. He half carried me up the stairs. In the kitchen above, he set me on a stool. He looked at me. He looked at the closed cellar door. He looked back at me. Pasticcera, he said. Yes, Beppe, I am giving up the diet, all right. I am eating a cannolo tonight, all right. I am eating 2 cannoli tonight, all right, Beppe. He sat down on the floor. He put his face in his hands. He cried, Beppe, who had laughed about the doctor, who had eaten white food for me, who had carried me up out of a cellar, cried into his palms for a full minute, and then stopped, and stood up and wiped his face with a dishcloth, and said, He will marry you, signorina. I tell you this now, because it will be embarrassing for him to say it, and one of us should. Beppe, 2 cannoli, signorina, 2. The cellar door opened. Lorenzo came up. There was a great deal of someone else's blood on the cuff of his coat, and he saw me see it, and his face did something I had never seen it do, embarrassed. He pulled the cuff out of sight. Renzetti? I said. Alive. The carabinieri will have him by morning. There is. He glanced at Beppe. Paperwork. He has friends. He had friends. He no longer has friends. Pasticcera, he came to me. He took my hands. It is not over. There is one more. There is the one above him. Capisci? But, he looked, at last, at the cuff of his own coat. But tonight you are warm. Tonight you are alive. Tonight is enough. Tonight was enough. It was. For one night. It was. The man above Renzetti was named Aldo Falcone. It was the name I had cooked for, in Naples, on the 2nd floor of a palazzo on the Via Caracciolo. I had not known it at the time. I had been told he was Don Massimo, a businessman, a friend of my husband's, a man who liked his vitello pink. The ledger I had given to the carabinieri had been his ledger. The 3 families it had destroyed in Naples had not, in fact, been 3 families. They had been 3 of his rivals. The carabinieri, who I had imagined as honest men, had used the ledger and then misplaced it, the way the carabinieri in certain parts of Italy were known to misplace things, and Falcone, a year later, had decided the only way to be certain the misplacing was permanent was to find the cook who had given it. Renzetti had been his hand. Renzetti was now in prison. Renzetti would be dead in prison within the month, because Falcone did not leave loose threads. This left Falcone himself. Lorenzo did not tell me he was going. He told me he was handling something, on a Friday in early December, with snow on the windowsills of the house near the Naviglio. He kissed my forehead, he kissed my mouth, he kissed my left wrist where it had healed crooked. He said I will be back by morning, and I, who had learned by then to read the weather in his face, said, I am coming. Pasticcera, I am coming, Lorenzo. He came for me. I will be in the room when he stops. He looked at me for a long time. All right, he said. It was the first time he had agreed to a thing he did not want to agree to. I think it was the moment, looking back when the marriage actually happened, months before any priest stood between us. The moment a man with a sealed door opens it because the woman he loves has put her hand on the latch and will not move. We went down to Naples that night. I will not describe the palazzo. I will not describe the room. I will say only that there were 6 men, and that one of them was Falcone, and that he had been waiting, sitting at the head of the table where I had served him vitello 100 Thursdays, and that he had a bottle of grappa, and 3 glasses out, and an expression of mild, almost paternal, disappointment. Bambina, he said, when I came in. Bambina, you cooked for me, I cooked for you. You should not have run. You should not have given me a reason. He looked past me, at Lorenzo. He smiled the way an old wolf smiles at a younger one. Vitali, you came down to my city for a girl. I came down to your city, Lorenzo said, for the second to last time. And the last? There will not be a last. There was no monologue. There was no speech. There were 11 seconds of stillness, and then there was a sound I will not describe, and there was Lorenzo standing with one hand pressed flat to his own ribs, because Falcone's man on the left had been faster than expected, and there was Beppe in the doorway breathing hard, and there was Salvo, on the floor for the rest of his life, and there was, on the table where I had once piped cream onto a millefoglie, the body of the man who had ordered my wrist broken, and Chef Rinaldi's heart stopped. Lorenzo sat down on the floor. Pasticcera, I see it. Move your hand, I moved his hand. The wound was below the ribs, on the right. Not the heart, not the lung. A long, shallow cut that had bled enough to scare him and not enough to take him. I packed it with a folded napkin that had been on the table, clean linen. Falcone had always insisted on clean linen. And I held it tight, and I said, in my pastry voice, in the voice of 3 taps on copper, "You are not dying. You are not allowed. Capisco. Say it. Capisco, pastiquera." He smiled. It was a small, ruined smile. It was the smile of a man who has found, in his own ribs, the bottom of his fear. We left Naples before dawn. We left Beppe behind to sit with Salvo until the right people came. We left, in the palazzo, the bodies, and the bottle, and the 3 glasses. I did not look back. I looked at Lorenzo's hand in mine, on the leather seat, and at the red on his cuff, and at the snow beginning, very softly, to fall against the windshield as we crossed the autostrada north. It was over. I did not say it out loud. He did not say it out loud. We did not need to. The car drove. The snow fell. Somewhere behind us, in Naples, a kitchen I had once worked in went finally cold, and a girl who had once piped cream onto fig tarts there was, at last, no longer a girl anyone in Italy was looking for. Beppe called from a payphone outside Bologna. 2 cannoli, he said. I am sitting at a pasticceria outside the Carabinieri station. 2 cannoli, Signorina, and a coffee, and Salvo had a daughter. Signorina, did you know? I did not know. She is 6. All right. All right, he said. All right. All right. Madonna. All right. It was over. We buried Salvo on a Wednesday. There were not many people. Salvo had not been a man with many people. There was his daughter Rosa, who held my hand through the service because Lorenzo had asked her if she would, and who afterward came home with us, and who lived with us in the end. Although that was a thing we did not yet know on the day of the funeral. There was Beppe, who wore a black suit 1 size too large because he had bought it in a hurry and refused to have it taken in. There was Marco from the trattoria, who had cried when he saw me, Mira, Mira, perdonami, perdonami, and to whom I had said, I forgive you, Marco. I do. Do not ask twice. I did not look at Lorenzo during the service. I looked at his hand. It was on the small of my back. 3 fingers. The lightest pressure. The way he had touched me in the rain, before he had any right. He had every right now. The world after war is a quieter world than people tell you. It does not feel like victory. It feels like a kitchen the morning after a banquet. Flour on every surface. Copper pots in the wrong places. And a soft, persistent humming you cannot find the source of. We rebuilt slowly. Lorenzo went to meetings I was not at, with men I did not meet, and came home in the evenings and took off his coat and washed his hands and came into the kitchen, where I would be making something. Bread, often, because bread is what you make when you are learning a new house, and he would stand in the doorway and watch, and not eat, but breathe in, and breathe in. He started eating sweet things again on the 17th day. It was a small thing, a spoonful of kermtisser off the back of a wooden spoon, while I was not looking. I caught his eye when I turned around. He had cream on his lower lip. He looked for a heartbeat, like a boy of 19 with a sister at his elbow saying, Lorenzo, leave. You are making the dough nervous. I did not say anything. I went on rolling the dough. He came up behind me. He put his hand on the small of my back. He said, very quietly, into the side of my hair, Pasticcera. Yes, Lorenzo. Marry me. I kept rolling the dough. I was not playing at it. My hands had decided the way my hands decide everything, before my head did. The dough kept moving, the pin kept turning, the flour rose in small soft clouds around my wrists. I rolled, and I said, into the dough, on 3 conditions. Tell me, I keep my own kitchen. No one decides what I bake. Not even you. Especially not you, yes. Rosa lives with us. Always. She is ours now. Capisci? Capisco? And I stopped rolling. I turned around. I put my floured hand flat on the front of his shirt, leaving a white print there, and I looked up at him. And the third is that you say please. He looked at me. His mouth did the thing his mouth had done that first night in the kitchen of the trattoria, before he had a smile to give. The shape that exists before a smile. And then, this time, the smile itself, small, tired, real. The smile of a man who had not used those particular muscles in a very long time, and had forgotten which ones they were. Pasticora. Please. All right, I said. I went back to the dough. He stood behind me a long time without moving. I did not need him to say anything else. I rolled the dough out and I cut it into squares, and I folded the squares into small purses around a spoon of ricotta and lemon zest, and I baked them in the oven of his sister, and I set the first one in front of the silver-framed photograph above the window, and I left the room. When I came back, the plate was clean. It was not a fairy tale, the proposal. There was no ring. That night. The ring came 3 days later, plain gold, his grandmother's, slid onto my finger over a kitchen sink while my hands were wet. There was no kneeling. There was no crowd. There were 2 people in a kitchen, and a girl named Rosa watching from the doorway with a piece of bread in her hand, and a fool named Beppe in the courtyard yelling at a delivery man about whether bresaola counted as a white food, and the small, soft sound of 3 taps on copper. Because I had set the new spoon down on the rim of the pot, the way my mother had taught me, the way I had taught, without telling him, the man who had, 11 years ago, found an oven still warm. That night, in our bed, Lorenzo turned onto his side and put his hand flat on my stomach. He did not say anything. He did not have to. I put my hand over his. We slept like that. It was the most ordinary thing in the world. After everything, Naples, the cellar, the rain, the door I had not walked through, it was the most radical thing in the world. It was 9 months later. We had a small pasticceria on the Via Solferino now. Mine. Mine in the way Lorenzo had promised. No one decided what I baked. Not even him. Especially not him. He came in some afternoons with Rosa, who was 7 now, and read everything aloud, including the menu, including the prices, including, once, the receipt of an extremely embarrassed customer, after which Lorenzo had taken her by the hand and explained very seriously what discretion was. While she nodded and ate a bombolone. I was working at the front counter on a Thursday afternoon in September. It was a quiet hour. I was piping a row of fig tarts, the recipe I had been making since I was 23, the small bright thing that had once been the first and last beautiful thing in my day. I had a copper pot at my elbow. The new wooden spoon, the one with the grain like water under ice, was in my hand. I tapped it 3 times against the rim and set it down. The bell over the door rang. The shop went quiet. I felt it before I looked up, the air pressure shift, the way air changes before a storm, although I knew now what the storm was, and the storm had a wedding ring, and the storm was mine. I looked up anyway because I always looked up now. I had earned looking up. Lorenzo was in the doorway. There were 2 men behind him I knew. Beppe, of course, holding a small cake box for reasons I would learn in a moment, and a younger man called Tonio who had taken Salvo's place, and behind them 3 men I did not know. Important men. The kind of men a kitchen goes still for. They had come, I gathered from Lorenzo's face, from a meeting that mattered. Lorenzo had brought them, on the way back, to a pasticceria on the Via Solferino, because he had wanted them to see something, although he had not yet said what. The shop had stopped breathing. I had a pastry bag in my hand and a half-finished rosette on a fig tart, and the cream would break if I stopped. I finished the rosette. I finished the second one. I finished the third. I did not look up. My hands did not shake. They had not shaken in 9 months, not since the cellar, and they did not now. The cream curled. Raised heart, raised heart, raised heart. The shop watched. When I had finished the row, I looked up. I met Lorenzo's eyes. His face did the thing his face did. The shape before a smile. Then the smile itself. He turned to the three men behind him. He said, in Italian, the kind of Italian a man speaks when he is not performing. Signori, this is my wife. That was all. He did not say the pastry chef. He did not say the woman who survived Renzetti. He did not say the girl who finished the rosette. He said my wife, and it was the smallest sentence and the largest one. And the three men nodded, and they understood, the way I had understood, 11 months ago, in his library, that a word had been picked up like a thing he intended to carry. He came across to the counter. He leaned on it on his elbows. He looked at the fig tarts. He looked at the copper pot. He looked at the new wooden spoon, and at the old wooden spoon, which I kept now in a small jar on the counter, because I no longer pretended I had not chosen. Pasticcia, he said. Yes, you did not stop. The cream would have broken. I know. He reached across the counter. He took my left hand, the one that had healed crooked, the one with his grandmother's gold ring on it, the one with flour to the elbow, and he turned it palm up, and he kissed the inside of my wrist where the bone had set wrong, and he stayed there a heartbeat too long, the way a man stays who has finally learned what stopping costs and what not stopping costs and which of the two he will choose every time, every time, every time. Beppe came forward with the cake box. He set it on the counter. Signora Vitali, he said gravely, I bring news. The doctor has given me permission to eat 1 cannolo a week. I am extremely emotional about this. I am also pregnant. No, I mean, Tonio's wife is pregnant. I misspoke, Madonna. I am celebrating Tonio's wife being pregnant, and I have brought you a small cake. Beppe, Signora, open the box. He opened the box. Inside was a torta della nonna. Plain. Pine nuts on top. The crust, the perfect shade of gold a crust gets when someone who learned from someone who learned from a mother makes it for someone who has been waiting 11 years. He had baked it. Beppe of the cabbage soup and the white foods and the protein paste. Beppe, who had once eaten 2 cannoli in a pasticceria outside a carabinieri station, because a man named Salvo had a daughter. Beppe who did not look at me now, because he could not, because his eyes were full. Lorenzo did not move for a long time. Then he picked up a fork. He cut a small piece. He ate it. He closed his eyes. He chewed slowly. He swallowed. He opened his eyes. They were wet, but they were not crying, because Lorenzo Vitali did not cry, and he did not do so now. He set the fork down. He looked at me across the counter. Pasticciera, he said. It was the 8th time in our lives. I had counted, the way a woman counts things she does not want to lose. Cold, in the kitchen, almost gentle, in the rain. Carried, in the library. Held, in the cellar. Kept, in the snow. Promised, in the kitchen with the dough. Vowed, on the day of the gold ring. And now this one. Earned. Yes, Lorenzo. Thank you. I tapped the wooden spoon 3 times against the rim of the copper pot and I set it down. It was enough.